From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. U.S. rejoins UN Human Rights Council after more than a 3-year hiatus. 81% of Americans concerned about internal threats. OIC condemns Israeli attack on historic Muslim cemetery. Imran Khan says India enjoys same impunity on Kashmir as Israel does on Palestine. International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation wins Islamic Finance Award. And now for our top story tonight. The United States returned to the UN Human Rights Council Thursday after a 3-year hiatus. The U.S. will serve on the council for a 3-year term beginning in 2022. Former President Donald Trump pulled Washington from the body in June 2018. He left the council claiming alleged chronic bias against Israel and inclusion of human rights abusers as members. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, thanked the overwhelming support from member states. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the Council plays a meaningful role in protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms by documenting atrocities. A Chicago Council on Global Affairs survey says more Americans are concerned about internal threats to the country than external ones. 81% of those surveyed said America is at risk from dangers within the nation, versus 19% who said threats coming from outside pose a greater risk. Another finding is that 73% consider improving public education key to maintaining U.S. influence globally. Other necessary factors are strengthening democracy at home and reducing racial and economic inequality, the survey said. In related news, a Chicago Council Ipsos survey found that 64% of Americans supported U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. It also noted that 57% of Americans say maintaining U.S. military superiority is important. More Americans believe U.S. military bases worldwide enhance the nation's military might. A U.S. House Oversight Committee memo says that the federal government hasn't determined the use of tear gas on humans to be safe. This comes after Representative Cori Bush called for an investigation into law enforcement agencies using the unregulated chemicals on civilians. Manufacturers supply millions of dollars worth of tear gas yearly to police departments nationwide. Tear gas and other crowd control measures were used by law enforcement at racial justice protests in the United States during the summer of 2020. Those were sparked by the killing of George Floyd by former Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin in May last year. Bush said, "Tear gas is not an inconvenience. It is a weapon of war." A rally outside the White House that began in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day this week is now in its 4th day. Hundreds of Native Americans and environmental advocates carrying banners and chanting slogans have called on President Joe Biden to reject fossil fuel projects and declare a climate emergency. For the first time, the White House announced this week that the U.S. will recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on the same day as Columbus Day each year. This was not a demand of the protesters. A Washington Post report notes that the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests were overwhelmingly peaceful. Conservative media outlets say that after George Floyd's murder by Derek Chauvin in May 2020, BLM-inspired protests were tearing cities apart. But according to the Crowd Counting Consortium, less than 4% of the summer's protests involved property damage. That is compared to 11% of protests during the civil rights movement. At least 33 people were killed and 74 injured in a suicide bomb attack on Friday at a Shia mosque in Kandahar, Afghanistan, officials said. No one has claimed responsibility for the assaults in the spiritual heartland of the Taliban. The latest attacks came a week after a suicide attack on Shia worshippers at another mosque in the northern city of Kunduz. Daesh claimed responsibility for that earlier attack. Taliban Interior Ministry spokesman Qari Saeed Khusti tweeted that they were saddened after the latest explosion in Kandahar, where a number of their compatriots were murdered and wounded. Friday's attack is the fourth mass casualty massacre since the Taliban took over Kabul in August. Meanwhile, the world is trying to figure out how to help Afghan people. Here's more in a report by Saliha Farouk.
Temperatures drop as low as minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit in Kabul. Nearly 5 million people in this largest city of Afghanistan are wondering how to manage life this winter. Most were not paid for months even before America left. The United Nations says it is a race against time. People are selling their belongings to survive. But there are not many buyers. Afghans outside Kabul are facing an even worse situation. America has frozen Afghan funds, $9 billion to be exact. The World Bank and the IMF have done the same thing. Now the United Nations have raised $1.2 billion, and the European Union have committed another $1 billion as well. Here is Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor.
Die im Zusammenhang mit Afghanistan
To stand by and watch 40 million people plunge into chaos because electricity can't be supplied and no financial system exists, that cannot and should not be the goal of the international community. They, however, do not want to work with the Afghan government. They want to give it to the NGOs. Can NGOs replace what a government needs to do? Do NGOs have an army? Do NGOs know how to manage supply chains? In the meantime, it is a race against time to help Afghans left behind, almost 40 million human beings. Nearly 700,000 of them are displaced, refugees within their country. This is Saliha Farouk for Muslim News.
The Paris Administrative Court on Thursday ordered France to fix climate deterioration during 4 years of neglect. According to French newspaper Le Monde, the ruling in response to France's commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions between 2015 and 2018. France was emitting 62 million extra tons of carbon dioxide during that period. It has since lowered emissions to 15 million tons. The nation has until December 31st, 2022 to clean up its act. The court rejected a request that the government pay a 78 million euros fine per semester for any delays. It said it was up to the Prime Minister and the government to find correct ways to solve the emissions problem. Britain's Cambridge University has suspended a £400 million deal with the United Arab Emirates. This is over its alleged use of the Pegasus spyware, The Guardian reported on Thursday. The university's outgoing Vice-Chancellor Stephen Toope made the announcement. In July, the deal was praised as a potential strategic partnership aimed at helping resolve some of the greatest challenges facing our planet. A more than £310 million donation over a decade would also have been included, making it the largest gift of its kind to the university. UAE's alleged use of the phone hacking spyware developed by Israeli firm NSO Group tanked the deal. The Guardian reports many of the UK phone numbers targeted by the spyware were at the behest of UAE. NSO Group has previously denied any wrongdoing. British lawmaker David Amess died on Friday after he was stabbed multiple times while meeting his constituents in Essex. The 69-year-old pro-Brexit Conservative MP was a father of 5. He was first elected to Parliament in 1983. He was attacked inside a Methodist church while holding a bi-weekly consultation in Leigh-on-Sea, east of London. Police said a 25-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. A knife was recovered at the scene. A Scottish man accused of terrorism offenses told police his claims that he was going to set fire to a mosque was a joke, a court reported. Sam Emery told officers he wasn't serious when he claimed on social media that he planned to broadcast the act live to internet users. The High Court in Edinburgh heard a recording of the 24-year-old being interviewed by detectives in July 2019. Emery faces 9 charges, including 3 under the Terrorism Act. Investigating officers believe he was plotting a terrorist attack on Fife Islamic Center in Glenrothes. Emery told officers he had been drinking when he allegedly posted comments on the instant messaging app Telegram. Emery claimed he wouldn't have said he hated Jewish, Black, and Muslim people if he was sober. White men often get away with criminal behavior on flimsy excuses. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said India and Israel enjoy similar impunity for their respective occupations of Kashmir and Palestinian territories. Speaking to Middle East Eye, Khan accused Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi of copying Israel's playbook by allowing settlers to acquire land in disputed territory. Kashmiris are fighting for the right of self-determination per a United Nations resolution. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, condemned an Israeli attack on the historic Islamic cemetery of Ma'man Allah in occupied East Jerusalem. The group also condemned the opening of the so-called Museum of Tolerance by Israel on cemetery grounds. It criticized Israel's exhumation of Muslim graves, which were more than 1,000 years old. The group said that the move is a provocation to the feelings of Muslims, particularly Palestinians. The International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, or ITFC, won the Global Islamic Finance Awards. ITFC CEO Hani Salam Sombol said that the group is honored to receive the award for being the best in the business. It also received the distinction in 2018. Sombol said that since its inception in 2008, the group has provided $58 billion worth of trade financing and support to strategic sectors in member countries. That includes critical sectors of health, energy, agriculture, and SMEs during the pandemic. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table.
I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Muslim Americans in Public Service published a set of 12 recommendations to improve working conditions for Muslims in public service. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Muslim Americans in public service face amazing challenges. In Capitol Hill, Islamophobes went after the Muslim staffers. And once I was talking to a staffer of a senator when she was called back to investigate something she was being accused of, which was nothing. She is still serving. But among those challenges, it is a good news that there is an organization called now Muslim Americans in Public Service. And they have published 12 recommendations to improve the working conditions for Muslim employees in the public service. Good to know there are Muslims in public service. And we have with us Ahmad Ma'ti. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Welcome to Muslim Network TV. And Ahmad Ma'ti is the chair of Muslim Americans in Public Service and also serving as senior economist at the U.S. Department of Transportation, which I hear is have a lot of money to build things around or at least in the tunnel or something like that. So tell us, what are the challenges faced by Muslims in public service?
Thank you for having me. So yes, Muslim American Public Service is a recently launched national organization that helps support this vulnerable community by providing basically a community that hasn't really existed formally in the past. And part of its work is to kind of unlock their potential so they can better serve their country, their state and local communities by providing professional development tools, mentorship, programming, so on, and also making sure workplace is free of discrimination. And, that's an important objective given, the past, we say, conditions that were not always favorable to Muslims being able to serve openly and with distinction, the same as any other community. And finally, the last objective is to get more Muslims engaged in public service. To answer your specific question, the challenges are more specific to the community than a lot of others who've also served their country. The overall climate you've described quite accurately. Muslims are, of course, welcome to serve at all levels in government and public sector, public service, state and local and federal level, armed services, and so on. But we often run into challenges when either the media has cast a certain level of suspicion on Muslim Americans in general. The Muslim Americans in public service face the consequences of that the same as they would outside of the government. So that's something that we feel that given government and public sector should constantly and faithfully represent all Americans and allow everyone to serve. We feel that there need to be additional protections for those who are willing to do so. But yes, they face certain recurring challenges, shall we say, not only in the political climate, but also in terms of formal representation. There's very few sources of representation for Muslims who want to serve, as far as staff associations, employee resource groups, overall community mentorship and professional development is also key. That's often lacking for Muslims who are in government. And as you said, when there are targeted campaigns against Muslims, as we've seen in the case of the Muslim Congressional Staff Members Association, there are very few protections, and it's often much easier for Muslims to capitulate or walk away from associations and formal representation rather than face the more public fight, as we've seen.
Actually, that Congressional Staffer Association disbanded itself during the Trump era because there was tremendous pressure, which began before it, targeting Muslims. What are they doing? Muslims in the Congress, and strange type of Islamophobes who attacked from outside. But inside, probably there was not a strong enough support, and they felt it may jeopardize their careers. So the Association of Muslim Staffers at Congress actually just disbanded. So your organization in that way is going to be helpful. So it is the government employees and also at city, state level, congressional level, or it is just limited to federal employees?
Yes, absolutely right. No, we found the need to establish an umbrella organization for Muslims in public service who choose to serve their communities, their state, their federal government, the armed services, and so on. So it's federal, state, and local, and it's all branches of government as well. We have members who are working on various legislative bodies, their city council, working on the U.S. Congress, and so on. Of course, the federal executive branch is a huge source of our membership, given just the size, so it's the country's largest employer. And also the judicial branch, you have a number of administrative law judges, federal judges, state judges in our membership as well. Because we don't really draw a distinction. We feel that if you're drawn to public service, you should be able to find community and pathways to cut across. You have many state level employees working in state houses that are looking to explore federal options. You have people on the Hill looking to get back into the executive branch, and so on. So it covers all three levels of branches, all three levels and all three branches of government. And we feel that, the story of Muslims serving their communities is not often told. And that's, we believe, an important one.
Do you have any idea how many Muslims are there in public service?
That's an excellent question. It's something that nobody really can answer, simply because the government doesn't collect data based on religious affiliation. And that's one of our recommendations that you mentioned earlier. And that's also one of our huge concerns moving forward. So if you can't really collect data, if you can't really understand the issue, how can you combat it? How can you address it? How can you resolve it? How can you redress it? It's very central. So there's additional push now to get various vulnerable groups, minorities, sexual orientation counted. But we also feel that religious affiliation is key in that regard.
Well, it might help you. In the late 70s, there was a lawsuit which went all the way to high courts. And in that deliberation, it was discovered that close to 1% in the armed services are Muslims. I wish I can find for you that old research, which must be sitting in somewhere in the printed format. Tell us, Muslims in large number are self-employed according to multiple surveys. So is there a desire among Muslims to essentially be in the public service? Because, once you're taking care of yourself in businesses, you may plan to increase your business, become entrepreneur and things like that. So do you feel people around you are really dying to serve public through government services?
Well, that's that's the challenge, right? So yes, well, Muslims serve all over government, as you mentioned earlier, but anecdotally, we don't feel that they're represented in the numbers proportional to their overall proportion in society. So we feel that it's a bit less than it should be, definitely at the higher levels. So that's something that we've noticed anecdotally, of course, because we're not able to access any data on this. But this issue is, I think, multifaceted, specifically when it comes to culture. As you mentioned, it's not a popular career choice, especially for parents to advocate on its behalf for their own children. And we feel there's many reasons for that. So, our community, Muslim American community is mostly African American, but the diaspora from the Muslim world, when they come to this country, they're first or second generation, and often parents come from a society where public service is not necessarily the most noble thing. It's often rife with corruption, or it just for some reason doesn't have the cultural cachet that it has here. So it's not really advocated for. They push their children to enter professional careers or go into business, as you said, self-employed. And that's what I think a couple of decades of that has caused our community to be mostly in those areas. We feel that in this country, it's quite the opposite. A lot of us have left private sector to enter public sector in the US because of how important it is and how it's really the front lines on social issues, on use of technology, policy making that really affect their neighbors and the communities across the country. It's a unique calling, and I think that once more Muslims are exposed to it, it should hopefully remedy the issue of less representation.
We're talking with Ahmad Mati, who is the chairperson for Muslim Americans in Public Service. You have 12 recommendations. Share with us a couple of most important recommendations to make public service more welcoming to Muslim community members.
Sure. Well, there are 12 recommendations, which we call the Inclusive Government Blueprint. Came about when our current president had followed through with his previous commitments and took a number of bold steps first day of office, including ending the Muslim ban, including overturning the ban the previous administration had on diversity and inclusion efforts in the federal workforce. And that was something that we really loved to see. And it was followed up in both cases. But as far as diversity and inclusion efforts, it really, was codified in an executive order signed on June 25th. And in that executive order, a lot of the previous wrongs had been addressed and solutions proposed for other minority and vulnerable groups. But at the same time, we felt that Muslim Americans who had faced specific and special challenges in the previous administration were, in the end of the day, left out of the series of reforms. And we felt that this could have been remedied to make it more inclusive. So in essence, to better operationalize the executive order for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility itself, we drew together 12 recommendations that are mostly simple and we feel much needed. And these include things like including combating religious intolerance or Islamophobia in the diversity and inclusion communications, policies, and strategies at the federal level across the government. Things like including data collection, disaggregated data collection at the federal level, as I mentioned earlier, to help better understand and address this issue. Additional things we've seen in previous years that have been a cause for concern, where people were appointed to career and non-career positions in government, very senior positions, who held Islamophobic views. Some of them were on record calling Islam a barbaric cult, and they were then in charge of not only religious freedom in government agencies, but also oversaw Muslim employees as a member of management. And we thought that that was untenable. So another one of the recommendations suggests that candidates be vetted for their positions, their animus or biases that they hold. And this is also true for the security clearance process. And it goes on to do also a number of positive recommendations as far as institution building with the Muslim community institutions for government programs and partnerships. Appointing a White House Muslim American liaison again that we had under President Obama, but was dropped under the previous Trump administration. And one of the key ones is to also vet the federal training programs that are for our national security professionals in foreign policy and national security. Not only are occasionally taught by Islamophobes, but also include content or framing of the issue of the Muslim world and their beliefs and practices in problematic ways. So we felt that these are, should also be addressed and redressed given this time in history where, diversity is now becoming a more stated objective and pursued more earnestly.
Well, thank you so much, Ahmed Maati, for your time, and good luck with your mission of getting more Muslims to serve public and making sure that the government is as welcoming as you are for them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That was an absolutely fascinating discussion. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.